Hi guys, welcome to my painting tutorial of a dandelion. So what I've done so far is taped down my paper, and transferred my image with a quick little transfer. I'll show a video of how to do transfers of a couple different ways, depending on what kind of supplies you have at home. So you can check that out. And for this acrylic painting, I'm just going to use my basic colors. I love using the primers because it keeps it simple. It's easy to find, just the primary colors. You can use craft paint from the dollar store. I found a really good paint from one of my favorite art stores that is a good price and also good coverage and good pigment and everything like that. So I've got white. I laid out to white in the center. I use a lot of white, yellow, red, blue. Okay, so let's start our painting. Oh, and I'll also show you brushes. Now, you can use whatever you have at home and whatever you're comfortable with. I try to keep it simple, so I'm just going to use two brushes for this one. And this is just a synthetic. I've got a small brush here to make any details and a broader rounded brush here. Okay, so the majority of my work will be done with this brush here. And then when it comes to a little bit smaller details, I'll go to the small guy. I always like to use the biggest brush possible because it stops me from getting too detailed. Okay. I also have a cup of water, which I'm going to use to clean my brushes in between colors. And I use paper towel to pat out my brushes once they're diluted with some water. Just stops your colors from getting muddy, making sure that you clean them in between mixing different colors. Okay, so I've got my image here, and I'll show you my reference photo. So it's a beautiful photo. It's a free photo stock image I found online. So I will add files to this video so that you can access the reference photo and a sketch as well. And so you're free to use this image, however you like. Okay, so that's my reference photo. I'm just going to tape it on my board so it doesn't move around on me. Okay. Now to start off, I think I'll actually use my small brush here, and I'll show you how I'm doing this. So what I like to usually do is start off with a quick sketch, and I like to mix a little bit of blue with a little bit of red. Okay, and I'm just going to swirl those guys together. It's going to give me a purple shade, and it's going to be a little on the dark side, which is what I want right now. Doesn't matter how much of each, as long as you like it. It's going to be a underpainting, so it really isn't going to show very much. So don't worry about the shade. And I'm just going to outline some of my lines here that are important to keep so I don't lose them. Okay. This dandelion has a little bit of a ragged edge to it, so I'm just going to give it a bit of a ragged edge. I'm going to use a little bit of water at this point. I find early on I like to use a little bit of water just to help the paint flow. I'm going to put in some of the darker elements here. There's a tree in the background, which is kind of blurred out with these light bubbles. There's some shadows and light on the grass. And you can just see the horizon line in the reference photo very lightly here. And there's a few little dandelions popping up in the grass. Very fuzzy, but I do want to indicate them. There. Okay. You can make them wherever you want them. It doesn't have to be exactly as the photo shows. A little bit more water. And I'm just gonna pounce it into the paint there. Just kind of mix the water in. Okay. This part should be fun, so it can be loose, not worried about accuracy or anything like that. Okay. So I basically outlined everything. Now I'm going to go and look for dark areas. So I need a little bit more paint. Still going in with this purple. I pulled a little bit more red this time, but it doesn't matter. Just kind of feeling that color. Okay, now I might actually at this point, I'm going to switch to the bigger brush. So I'm just going to scrape off the paint that I have on this brush as much as I can. Save it, save what I got. Rinse that out. Pat it on the paper towel. And then use my broader brush here to cover more space. Helps you paint a lot faster using a bigger brush. A little bit of water in there. Now the reason I'm using purple and not green is just to tone my paper. I look for any dark spots and I'm gonna just color them in. Leaving the light spots. Looks like I missed a little guy here. I'm just mixing a little bit more color. And missed that little guy in there. And now I'm just going to add a little bit more water. And keep going here. So my next step is going to be adding some color in. So I think I'll start with my dark greens in here. Still using my larger brush. And I want to mix a fairly dark green. So I'm going to take a good scoop of yellow. And yellow is very weak pigment compared to blue. Blue is very strong and it will easily dominate my yellow. So I don't want to do equal parts just yet. I want to kind of tiptoe in. I can always add more blue. It's hard to add a lot more yellow in after the fact and I'll just waste paint. So I'm going to go in slowly with the blue. Okay, and then I'm just going to give that a swirl, see what I get. It's a nice looking mid-tone green. Now, a little tip I have for mixing greens is to add just a touch of red to them. I'm just going to take the tip of my brush and like tiny little bit here. Okay. A little bit of red in that, and it just makes the green look that much more natural, because greens have a tendency to look very neon and bright, which isn't very natural for this setting here. I might even do a little bit more. And you have to be careful too, because this will muddy your green. So again, you can go too far, so it's best just to do a little bit at a time. And that is a nice natural looking green. I'm really happy with that. More on the army green kind of side. That's what the red does to the green. Okay, so I'm just going to go in with this mid-tone green where I see it in my photo. And you'll notice how transparent the green is. Most of these pigments are quite thin. It's not till we use white that it becomes opaque. So that's why I did the dark background, because that would have taken a lot of dark color to make a dark green. But it's acting as a nice base for me. So it's okay if my green is a little bit on the thin side. And acrylic paint tends to be made up, paintings tend to be made up of a lot of layers. So you can't judge it based on this first layer at all. There's going to be much more happening here. So have patience. It's probably one of the #1 rules for art in general, I guess. Be patient, and patient with yourself and your art. It takes time. So I'm covering everything but these dandelion areas. And I also think I'll go over these blue lines too, or purple. So it's a little bit more natural looking. Now, one of the things I like to do is while I have a color on my brush and in my palette, I like to work with it. So I know I'm going to lighten this up a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and add some yellow into this mixture. And with what's left on my brush and just what's left in the palette, I'm just going to swirl it around. And that's one of my tips I like to do. It's kind of a really good way to be efficient with your paint, so you're not constantly mixing new colors and you don't end up with a lot of waste either because you've used all the color. So I'll go into the lighter spots here. There's a bit of a halo effect around these dandelions, which I really like. So sort of going to circle around them with this lighter green. I'm not covering it all, I'm just doing spots here and there. I do want to keep some of my dark showing. Okay. Now I'm going to add a little bit of white to that same color and start to lighten things up a little bit more. So it tends to be light from the back down. So it's a little bit more light on this back side here. Now this color, that'll work well there. Painting is very intuitive, so I probably never paint anything the exact same twice. Just a matter of what you're feeling at the moment. The longer you do it, you'll start to get more processes of how you work. But it's okay if it's different every time. You have to learn, and sometimes that keeps you learning new ways. I'm still using the broad brush, but if you want to go down to the smaller brush, you can. You just kind of have to know how to hold the brush in order to get it to do those smaller details. So instead of it being flat on the paper, I'm holding it more upright and just making more lines like that. And there's different brush techniques you can use. You can just do lines, you can do dots, circles. You'll find what you're comfortable doing, and it'll kind of evolve naturally your style. Okay, now it is a little bit more darker up there, so again, I'm going to go in with some white to this existing color here and take it one more step lighter. Careful to get all the paint out of your brush. Okay, this is probably a good color for these areas in here. Some really light spots on the grass where the sun's hitting. I also like to do little, kind of like pointillism, little dots every once in a while. Just creates nice little spots for the eye to go to. You kind of want your eye to dance around a piece of artwork, not really get stuck on one point or the other, but you know it's working when you can kind of flow through your painting or drawing sort of smoothly. Okay, that's good. Now this green can also work up here. The thing with being in the distance is it's a little bit faded. So what I do to fade my colors out is add some of the opposite color, and that'll desaturate it. So I'm going to add a little bit of red. Red and green are opposite on your color wheel. Complementary colors. And that just takes my green down. And essentially it's going to kind of muddy it up a little bit. And that's good because I want it to fade to the background here. It's kind of a nice red-green color. And I'll cover up most of that purple. It's okay if I lose it. I can still see it. And I'm just leaving these really light spots white. There's a little bit of a halo effect, so anywhere it's really light is kind of outlined with this color. That's pretty good. Now I also like to use, if I see a color somewhere else in the painting, I like to do it at the same time. So again, I don't have to mix that color. So I see a little bit of this color in my dandelion. So I'm going to throw that in there. And it's almost just like the background is poking through. So it's not solid, but sort of radiates out from the center here. Now I'll go back in later with some more white, but I just want to give it a bit of an undertone there. And there's also a little bit around the edges, showing that light popping through the edges, which is really pretty. So I'm running a little low, so I'm just going to add some more white. I don't want to cover up all the dark because it is creating a nice outline, but I do want to show a little bit of light shining through. I think that's pretty good. This color is also in the stem, so I'll do that. Show you a couple ways. So you can use your big brush. If you don't feel confident, go to your smaller brush. Okay. I also see this color around the other dandelions here. So I'm going to use it while I've got it. It also looks like a good base color. Oops. Let me lighten that up a little bit so I have some more paint here. Okay. I think I'll just cover the whole thing. And then anywhere else you want to pop it out. I'm going to do one more lighten up here with some white. And just pop out these areas here. A good trick to get your paint to stick on top of wet paint is to work parallel to your surface. So instead of scraping it perpendicularly here, I'm going to glide across, and it's going to allow the paint to drag off of it much better than if I was to scrape it. It gets a little thin. So I'm going to glide across like that, and I can leave nice thick spots if I want to. I'm going to soften this edge here where the white will go. Okay, rinse out my brush. Just pounce it down so the paint comes out of the brush on the bottom of the cup. And then I also like to just scrape it off here. Okay. And then I'll wipe it off on my paper towel. Now I think I'll go in with some yellow and do these little dandelions. I'm going to go to the small brush. I'm just going to pull the yellow straight. I like this yellow, and put that in there. Now yellow is a very transparent color, so if you want to make it cover better, take some white and yellow. Give that a stir. You'll notice it's a lot more opaque as long as you have a nice opaque white. Craft store paints can be pretty good, surprisingly, for that. If you see any other spots you want to try, there's a bit of yellow up here. Okay. Now I'm going to fill in the white spots. And the background is a little bit of a soft white. So I'm going to take my white and just add a touch of yellow and a tiny bit of red. See, yeah, very tiny amount. That's good. So I got a nice off-white color there. You can kind of create swirls to give it a nice circle shape. Okay, now I've run out, so I'm just going to make a little bit more for my dandelion. It's okay if it's not exactly the same. I'm just kind of using the tip of the brush and basically making dots with a little bit of a squiggle. I want to keep some of that green in there. Also want to make sure I keep the darks a little bit there too. I think I'll go over the whole thing and then go over with some straight white. Now it's kind of nice to have these rough edges here. Show the fuzziness of the dandelion. So I want to use straight white, just as it is, and pop my dandelion out a little bit more here. Again, I just use kind of a dot. It's okay to have some floating off the actual dandelion too. Okay, now I do need to darken that area a little bit, but while I have my white, I noticed a few spots in the background that I want to lighten up. So I'll throw that in there. I want to keep that separation between my background and my dandelion, so I'm going to leave that dark spot. Okay, it's coming together. Just rinsing my brush out. Now I kind of look at the overall picture and see where I need to go. So I know I need to darken this up. I need to address my stem a little bit more. There's a bit of red going on over here in my reference photo and some over here, some pinky red tones, and then probably a little bit more detail in the grass. So I'll just work through it one by one. So this area is kind of small. I'm going to bring out my little brush and I want to create a dark. So how do we create basically black without black? Well, we can do it. What we need is blue. Do it over here. Red and yellow. And you just have to figure out the right proportions. I did more or less equal there, and that gives me a pretty good dark color. If you want to darken it up, just a touch more blue. Okay, that's pretty good. And it will read as black. I don't like using black because it can be a very harsh color and kind of a dead color. Kind of prefer to use warmer tones. So that's why I don't use black. But you can see it's coming out looking like black. which is just what we want, but without the harshness of black paint straight from the tube. Okay, I'm going to define it a little bit more here. It's okay if our white mixes a little. That actually works really well sometimes. Happy accidents. Thank you, Bob Ross. They truly are happy accidents. Now I'll go in anywhere else I see dark. Now I know it's reading a little blue, so if it's too blue, take a little red. If it's too much of one color, go to the opposite color on your color wheel. With the primaries, if it's like too yellow, I would add a little bit more blue and red, right? So just helps combat that. Let's see this. That's a nice color. So there's a little tree in the background here. I never really like to do straight lines, and it's also kind of blurry because of the way the light's coming around it here. There's some dark over here as well. It's also a little bit darker over here. And a bit down here. So by adding a bit of darkness everywhere, it sort of balances out this piece. I'm just kind of scumbling it across. Just basically rubbing the brush into the paper. It's a little darker at the bottom here too. Okay, I think that's pretty good. Just going to define my horizon line a little bit up here. Okay, so I got my darks. Now they're looking a little harsh. So what I want to do is soften the edges. So I'll mix up a color, probably a bit of a greeny tone to soften that up. So I'm going to take some yellow, a little bit of blue, and some white. And a little bit of red, because that's a bit too bright. That's a nice color. Okay. So I'm going to soften these edges a little. Don't have to cover them up, just soften a little bit. And your brush might get muddy, and that's okay. Just dab it out on the paper towel. There's a little bit of this in the dandelion too. I can start to use lines now. Kind of show those little bits that come out. Okay. Now we are getting close to finishing somewhat. So I always like to just give it a bit of my flair, my style. Get loose with the brushwork. There's a bit more down here. I'm going to mix some more, a little bit more red this time. Yellow. Now, this is also a happy accident. Not what I was going for, but it actually works really well for the background. So what do we do with these happy accidents? Embrace them. Don't waste paint. Use what you got. Okay. That's that pink red I was talking about that I wanted to throw in. Just gonna kind of circle around, maybe some water, a little bit of water in there. Circle around these dandelions here. So this is a great example of how to take your painting to the next level by just adding another color throughout the piece. So it's not just yellow and green and white. I'm livening it up here with another tone, another color. So we've got this red, orange, and there's a little bit more pink in there too. So I want to create that. So I'll do red and white. Or I just had cream left over, so that works pretty good. Use what you've got. I like that too. That livens it up a little. And I don't want to just do it in one spot. I want to dance around here so it feels balanced. So I'll throw a little over here. So I just add a little bit of white in there. Now I have another color. And I soften up that first color. Now it's starting to come alive. Hey, why not throw a little bit of this in our dandelion too? You'll start to see more colors in things when you paint a lot more. You may not see it initially, but they're there. And learning to pull them out is really fun. And then when you do, that helps everybody else see them too. Making it easier on your viewer to see your artwork. Okay, so another thing that I want to add in here is just popping up this white all around, popping up my green. So let's start with the green. So I need a mid-tone green again. So I'll pull my yellow and some blue. A little bit less blue than yellow. Mix it up. A little bit of red. And this is the part about layers with acrylics. It goes on thin, so we have to add a few layers to get the coverage we want. I don't want to cover all of it, but I do want to thicken some spots up. Fix my stem a little there. And I'll do my lighten technique here too. So I've got some paint left. Add some yellow. Add some white. And then go over top of that. And this is where you get to have fun with your brush strokes. I love little dots, kind of borrowing from the pointillism style. It's very fun and very effective. Create little points of interest. Sometimes I hold my brush more like as if you were just picking it up off the table. Helps me keep it looser instead of like a pencil. Pencil is when you're looking for more detail and want more control, but it's tight because you can only go as far as your wrist will let you. When you hold your brush as if you just picked it up off the table, right, with these two fingers, you're using your whole arm, which allows you to be a lot looser. Okay, maybe one more lightened up version here. Yellow, white, swirl. That's a nice color. Okay, now this is pretty bright, so it's going to pop. So I want to be kind of careful where I use it. I may even go to my small brush, but let's try it first here. I think I'm okay with this brush. You want to look at your reference photo, but you also want to make sure you're looking at your picture to see if it feels balanced. Okay, it's coming along. I'm gonna rinse my brush and we'll go and lighten up some of those more light spots again. Okay, so let's take some white and I'll find a clean spot here. I'm gonna take, so this is the beauty of having other colors on your palette. I'm gonna take a little bit of that color. If you don't have any of that color, I would just take a little yellow and a little red. I just want to create an off-white, but I want to be efficient, so I'm going to take what I got. Okay, I'm just going to pump up this. And I like what's happening when the colors are blending here, so don't be afraid of that. Creates nice soft edges. That's what we want for these circles. My brush picked up some purple, another happy accent. Use it, drag it across. It's a beautiful color. I liked how that blended out there. Embrace what you think is an accident, because it's not. Okay, I'm going to take some straight white. Load up some more white paint. Okay. My paint's a little chunky because I have it in these tubes, these squeeze bottles, and I haven't cleaned it out in a while, but kind of like the texture. So you know what? I'm going to go with it. Okay, I'm happy with that. A little bit down here. And then I just want to make sure my dandelion pops out here. I think I'll go to the small brush for this because it's a bit more detailed. Now I need to draw some more attention to the stem. So let's do a green. And this actually works really well. I'm going to use that green there. Okay. I'm going to set a little bit of a highlight on here. So rinse my brush and then go, let's do the lighten technique. So take some white, lighten this color. And the light's coming from the top left here. So I want to focus my highlight on the left side without it getting too thick. I think I'm just going to go straight with the white. It just depends how sharp you want it to be. That's a little high contrast for me, so I'm gonna take another color here. Let's use this one and soften that up a little bit. That's better. It's also going to be darker on this side because that's where the shadows cast. Light's coming from this side, shadow's going to be on this side. So I want to make sure I create a nice dark shadow for it to stand out. So I'll do purple. I think I have a little left here. Yeah. Need some more. So blue, red. Make it look really dark, like a black. You add a touch of yellow. All the colors. So there's a shadow. Just scraping paint off here so it's not so full of paint. There's a shadow at the underneath here. I might just do a big dollop there. And then a little bit down the side. And while I've got this color, I'm going to go in here and add another dark layer to that. Okay. I think I'm pretty happy with that. I just need to add a little bit of white in there to go over that dark area. I'm going to do a combination of this color here and some white. That just softens it up a little bit around the edges. And then pure white. Rinse my brush out, dried it off. Now these are kind of tiny, so I'm gonna see. I'm just gonna do little starburst shapes. Some lines, some dots. Okay, and this, just gonna pop this flower out a little bit, this dandelion. Gonna do a little bit all over here. Get that edge bright again. Now you'll notice we're kind of losing that edge there. What we can do is darken the back a little bit. I'll set this aside, take my bigger brush here, and I just want to do an off-white to darken it up a little bit there. So my dandelion stands out a bit better. There. Throw this around it so it looks natural. Nice color there. And lighten it up a touch. The top. Okay, that's pretty good. Okay, now back to the small brush and straight white. You can lay the paint on thick at this point too, to create some more shadow and focal point to this guy. I'm going to bring it in a little bit. And this kind of style of painting is very impressionistic, so I'm not worried about every detail. I just want the impression of this dandelion. So that's what these strokes, these radiating strokes are for. Just give you the impression that it's coming from the center and going out. And that's perfectly okay if the green mixes in a little. I kind of like that. Dots are good too. Okay. Now I just kind of look at the whole picture and see how it's balancing out. I kind of like these pink tones in here, and I feel like I want to pop them up a little bit more because they're pretty fun. So that's one thing I might do. I could call it quits. I totally like this as it is, but we never know when to stop, do we? That's the hard part about being an artist. So I'm going to do a little bit of a yellow and red. I'm kind of working in an orange here. That's fun. I'm going to pop that in a little bit just every once in a while here to create a little bit more interest in my piece. I don't want to forget about down here. Okay. Now I'm gonna lighten that up a touch. So I take my white and I just mix it in to that orange color I did. And I always kind of like to soften things a little bit. So I'm just gonna slightly graze over those colors. Okay, and then I also realized I need to pop my dandelions out a bit more here. So I'll do that with some yellow and white. You want to add some more in at this time, you can. Sometimes it also helps to blur your eyes a little. Just squint and look at your picture overall and see where the lights and darks are and if there's anything that needs attention. It also helps to keep it loose. So when I blur my eyes, I'm not worried about the details. I'm just looking for areas I want to show a bit of that light reflecting impression. Okay, I feel like I could go at this all day long, but I should probably wrap it up. Okay. One more thing. A little bit of white down in here. Want to make sure this still stands out above the rest of it, but it's a balancing act. Okay, I'm happy with that. So that's my dandelion painting. Thanks for joining me. Hope you had fun. And see you in the next video. I want to show you taking off the tape because that's a very rewarding part of our painting process. So you do have to be a little careful to not tear. What I tend to do is pull away from the paper so that I don't tear it off into my picture. So I'm just going to slowly start and pulling away from your painting. Ooh, look at that crisp white edge. So pretty. Oh, I got a little tear, so I'm going to actually go from this side, see if I can get away from that. It does happen occasionally. If you go slow, it tends not to tear so much. There we go, pretty good. All right, so that's the finished piece, guys.